Hello, my name is Amy Eberlin, and I am a Quality Enhancement Specialist at QAA Scotland. And I'm very pleased to welcome you to our second session of day two at our Learning from Disruption event. Our second session, as all of you will hopefully know, is called Student Engagement in a Time of Crisis. I'm pleased to be joined today by a number of student representatives from across our Scottish students' unions and associations. We felt, the QAS team felt, that as we created this program for the event yesterday and today, that we really wanted to showcase student voice and student perspectives and not just speak about it, but have them share their experiences and their perspectives. So we're really glad that we had 4 student representatives agree to join us today. I'm going to pass it over to them to introduce themselves in a couple of minutes, but I just want to give you an idea of what you're going to see in this panel. We're not going to have a presentation, which you might have seen at yesterday's sessions. Instead, it's a Q&A for the next 45 minutes. So we have a few guiding questions which are listed on the program, but we'd also really like to encourage you to provide questions for the students, asking about their experiences, their perspectives, and their thoughts for the future. I would like to, in the first instance, ask Alexander Hedlund, who is our student theme lead, to introduce himself. Alex?
Hi, yeah, so I'm Alexander Hedlund. I'm the current Vice President of Education at Heriot-Watt University Student Union. As Amy said, I'm also the Enhancement Theme Student Lead. So this past year as student lead, I've been working a lot on improving student engagement with the themes themselves, which is going to be a really useful time into the shift to online learning.
Great, thank you, Alex. Katie, how about you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Katie Dubarry. I am currently Vice President of SRUC's Student Association that we affectionately call SRUC. And over the last year, my work internally has mostly been focused around education and quality affairs. And I've also been lucky enough to work with NUS Scotland as their representative on SHEIC, as well as working with QAA Scotland, for example, on the student-led project this year. And when I have some other spare work time, I like to work on our class rep system and also try and convert people to the benefits of using reusable menstrual products.
Thank you, Katie. Liam, can you introduce yourself next?
Hi everyone, my name is Liam Brady. I'm the current Vice President Education at Glasgow University Students Representative Council and President-elect for the next year. So throughout this year, I've been involved with launching a student representation toolkit, which is basically to provide a place of resources for class reps and school representatives just to really encourage them in their role.
Thank you. And Andrew.
Hi everyone, my name's Andrew Bowie. I'm the Vice President for Higher Education with the Highlands and Islands Students Association at the University of the Highlands and Islands. Got all that out in one breath, that's a good start. So my work this year has focused a lot on bringing representation to our cohorts of students who have been traditionally underrepresented in the past, and that's focused mainly on nursing students, midwifery students, and postgraduate research students as well. I'm also one of the representatives on QAA UK's Student Strategic Advisory Committee as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Before we jump into the questions, I do want to flag the new and existing resources that we have listed on the conference website. You can find them if you go through the program. There's a button on the top that says View Day 2 Resources. And those resources, some of those resources come from the student-led project, which Katie mentioned, and which Alex has been a chair of. We have made the planner. If you've used any of our resources, we have a students using evidence guide, and it has an associated planner. And we have made that planner editable so that you can amend the months that the planner may work for, or you can type directly into it. We've also got some tips on how you can use the students' voice cards online to help you with fostering student engagement and voice in an online learning environment. And those ideas very much came out of our student-led project. So I'm very excited to see those launched today. Alex, I'm going to start a question with you, but then I'd love everyone to jump in on this. How do you think the swift pivot to online learning has impacted student voice and engagement? You know, it's a big question, but let's start there.
Big question, but a good one to start with. So besides the obvious of everything moving to being online and there's no face-to-face, we're seeing a lot more constant communication with reps, a lot of it being on the fly. We're having to be a lot more proactive rather than reactive, the way that we would normally be. And reps are being brought into a lot more decision making. And we even have them meeting with senior management bi-weekly in a really open and honest space so we can get that feedback that we need. We're seeing our channels that we use being diversified. So instead of just relying on those meetings with reps, we're using Facebook, email, WhatsApp, any way that we can to contact students and really maximize our networks. We're seeing faster feedback systems as a whole because they're streamlined through that immediate contact with the reps. We're not having to wait around for that meeting that's in a week or two. We can just contact them and get that feedback that we need. We'll actually find that we're messaging students and saying, hey, what do you think of this? I need to know in X amount of time so I can put it forward in this meeting. We've really had to think of novel ways to use online engagement. So for example, we don't know how many students are in halls because they're worried about the risk of infection. So we're contacting them and keeping in touch with them through our WhatsApp groups. And as well, we're trying to monitor how many students are actually in halls by using Wi-Fi usage. So really novel ways of looking at what engagement actually means and can be used for. And we're also making sure that because of lockdown and the impact it can have on mental health, that we're really promoting that well-being engagement as well. So on our union social media, we're posting about exercises students can do, self-improvement, good mental health practice. But most importantly, the swift pivot has really shown how important clarity and communication with students is. When there's an issue, we will hear about it. It happens fast because social media works both ways. We can communicate with students, and when they have an issue, they are very ready to tell us. It's also really highlighted the importance that the SABs have, or FTOs, whatever you want to call them, whatever you want to call us, and the role that we play as the bridge between students and staff. It's paramount for us to help eliminate any ambiguity or nuanced parts of the communications that are going out to students. So we're not leaving them wondering or confused what's happening. Clarity really is key. It's important to note that we have seen a shift in student engagement as a union over the last 2 years, even before the pandemic. We've seen our face-to-face engagement drop, and we've seen a lot more online engagement. So we've seen this coming for a while now, but it's good that we've all as a sector unified in this shift. It really ties into the research on Gen Z students that we've seen and the difference in learning styles and education expectations. Things that have gone well, we've heard, but things that have gone bad, we've listened. We're getting that immediate feedback because students are empowered to do so through this shift to online.
Thanks, Alex. Andrew, I'd be interested to hear your perspective, given that HISA already has a very decentralized rep system. So have you seen a change in student voice and representation over this year?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting for us because obviously at UHI we've already got a really, really strong history of online learning and online engagement anyway. For us at HISA is actually still a very young students association in terms of the sector. We've only existed for 5 years, unlike a lot of older ones, particularly at the ancient universities that have been around for hundreds of years now. So for us, we're still growing. We're still a young union, and we're still developing the ways that we are engaging with our students online. But what the crisis has really done for us is just given us a reason to accelerate those plans and to bring a lot more of our engagement activity into the digital space. So for us, we were typically doing face-to-face rep meetings at our different academic partners before this, but they've pivoted really quickly and really seamlessly into the digital space. And we're actually finding it's much easier for students to engage with our rep system now that we're experimenting in the digital space a lot, because we're able to set up discussion spaces on virtual learning environments so that class reps can contribute ahead of a meeting and after a meeting as well. So there's no longer this requirement to be physically present, to have your voice heard and to have your questions answered, basically. So what we're really excited to basically just keep this momentum going and just basically pivot into a fully digital system anyway going forward. You know, for us, this has been a step forward with no intention of taking a step back, and students have been really keen to be more engaged. as things have gone on, because there's a lot of issues that they're really, really passionate about having their voice heard on. You know, so in the past, where it is maybe we were doing a little bit of guesswork about what the students were interested in or what kind of things they would like to do, it's quite clear and quite focused for us what they want to do now, and they've been extremely proactive about getting in touch with us, and the university has been really, really proactive in working in partnership with us to address those concerns quickly and efficiently. And I really can't credit the staff at the university enough for working with us and listening to the students' concerns, which I think will really, really benefit both UHI and HISA going forward in terms of the relationship with the students and engaging with their voice.
I mean, that's great to hear, Andrew. Katie, have you seen a similar proactivity in student engagement with the shift to online or digital learning?
I'd say our experience is actually quite mixed in some way. So with this rapid shift and setting up those online groups, which we didn't have those sorts of forums set up for our students to access us or our class reps to access us easily. We were very, very strongly campus focused, and which in itself has its own difficulties when you're a dispersed institution. So I feel like actually what we've seen is we have some people who are coming and interacting in these virtual spaces that might not have made it into the on-campus spaces previously. And I think that's very interesting. And also, you know, we've also seen a drop off in some people that we were used to seeing regularly and that we're now not seeing in this virtual space. And I think there's a lot at play there. I think there are, obviously, with the rapidity at which we've segued into this panic goji, love that term from this morning's session, there's been access issues for some students, and the college has responded, I think, really well to that. But it's also something that we do need to recognise, that not all students are ready and comfortable with using these online systems in the same way as some others, you know. And also in and Andrew, this might be similar to you guys with a lot of rural students, there can be physical barriers there as well in terms of even accessing systems with a stable internet connection. And so yeah, really a mixed bag. I think it has been successful because we've been able to maintain contact as much as we can. It's been really good also for providing an alternative social space with students. So having a place where people can just come and chat, you know, and that can be focused around different areas. We've had mental health focus groups, we've had parents focus groups, so people can just share a space like they would on campus with each other and also with us. And that's been a really good way to communicate out with the sort of formal class rep system, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing that we've seen as a sector come out of this period, is the move to online development of social spaces and communities and supporting societies and clubs. Liam, have you had a similar experience at Glasgow, or have you seen different challenges or benefits coming from the shift to online, emergency online teaching?
Yeah, I would. I suppose as everyone went through, I was agreeing with what they said, but then I think Katie made a very good point there in terms of access to technology and what sort of we can expect students to be able to adapt to. But I definitely think once they're provided with the resources, and I must admit this is something that the university did very well, was to make sure that our students had access to we have a laptop loan scheme, so if that was needed, that we were ensuring that gets out to our students. But once they have the technology that they need, it just shows how resilient students are and how definitely adaptable to the crisis. I suppose from a student association point of view, it just shows how much social media is our friend. Definitely we've utilized our Facebook. We've been putting out trying to put out weekly updates to let students know what we're up to. And for the first probably few weeks of going into lockdown, we were holding weekly meetings with our council, and that just really let us know what students were saying and ensured that as sabbatical officers, what we were feeding back more to senior members of the university was correct, and that we weren't leading everyone astray, which always helps. So I definitely have appreciated having that more frequent communication with people, and I do think as we go forward in terms of how we're especially for next semester of the next academic year. It's so important for us to be able to just keep that communication with students in the move to online learning for probably a longer period now, where we just want to make sure that what we're doing is right and works for as many people as possible.
Thank you, that's great. Andrew, I'm going to start with you for this coming question. It's the most highly upvoted one that we've received so far from Alison Tobin, and it's what has been working well for students during remote learning and what hasn't? Do you have any kind of opinions or perspectives on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think what's been working well is students have actually found this a really good opportunity to foster a much tighter relationship with their lecturing staff and their support staff. You know, at first we weren't actually seeing many concerns coming to us, and as it turned out, that was because they were just going straight to their lecturers or whoever was supporting them, their personal academic tutors, and the relationship had been built up so much that they were just able to solve the problem between them. So I think it's been a really, really good opportunity to strengthen that partnership between staff and student at the academic and at the support level. I think also students have been, you know, as I say, they've been very engaged with us in terms of telling us what works for them and what doesn't work for them, in terms of when we're changing assignment deadlines and bringing in different mitigating circumstances policies as well. So I think students have been really grateful for that kind of approach from the sector, to just being really understanding about the flexibility that was going to be required, because everyone was in a different situation and nobody really knew what situation everyone else was in. So I think that ended up working really well for our students. I mean, there have obviously been numerous challenges as well, not least in terms of accommodation and in terms of getting access to the appropriate IT, like what Liam and Katie were touching on there. We've been as proactive as we can be, I think, as a union and as a university, in terms of trying to get that technology out to folk that didn't have access to it. But there's also the concern around digital literacy as well. We've got quite a lot of mature students who perhaps aren't as well versed in using technology and video conferencing as we are. So it's been interesting and really challenging to work out how we engage with them and how they can engage with us to bring that digital literacy up to the place it needs to be, so that they can continue to engage with their studies. Because if they were used to just going on campus, somebody else would perhaps be dialing into their video conference for them. Most of our HE courses are taught via video conference anyway, but there will be other people in the room with you. So even if you weren't confident with the technology, there would almost certainly be someone that was, and you could just sit and engage anyway. So without that there, that's probably been a real challenge for them. And I think going forward, digital literacy is going to be a really interesting thing for the sector to look at in terms of this new normal that we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, do you have any thoughts on what has or hasn't worked during this quick transition to online learning?
I think, just to echo a lot of what Andrew said, you know, students are definitely more empowered to solve issues on their own. And I think it's that depersonalization of online engagement. They don't have that fear of asking maybe what they would think is a stupid question, but obviously lecturers will never think that of a student. And so removing that sense of fear or status difference has really empowered students to make their own changes as they see fit. But as well, as it's been mentioned a lot, digital exclusion is going to be probably one of the biggest challenges, if not the biggest challenge of the coming year, particularly for us as an institution where we've got 5 global campuses, and obviously we have students from around the world. So there will be some international students who can't access things reliably, and we're going to have to be a lot more flexible in the way that we look at assessments and things like that. In terms of what has worked well, it's that flexibility that students have. It's that ability to consult the resources. The move to take-home exams has been really, really well received. I mean, students have performed far beyond our expectations. That ability to do it in your own time and have the time to take it at your own pace is really useful to students.
Thank you. I kind of want to grab onto something that Alex and Andrew, you were talking about, but Katie, you'd mentioned before, is this idea of an importance in fostering community and an idea of what being a university student at your university is, but also the social benefits of being involved in different organizations on campus. I think, Liam, I'm going to go to you with this question. It's one that's been quite highly upvoted. is about what we as a sector, what institutions can do to foster student engagement and student communities over the summer. And with remote teaching and learning and some meaningful but physically distanced campus life in autumn or the next academic year, how, in your opinion, can we foster ongoing and inclusive communities? And I know that's a big question as well, but give it a shot.
Yeah, that's what I do with everything, just give it a shot. So a big thing that I've sort of been passionate about in terms of building community, and this is before sort of anything COVID related, is the whole idea of peer-assisted learning and a peer-assisted study support. I just think that is such an essential part of being a student. Like realistically, no one goes through it alone. There's always other people surrounding you, whether you go to what have been your lectures, there's always people there. Even as staff members, research is always done realistically with more than one person. I just think in terms of how we can aid students in learning, but also it just fosters that idea of well-being around it, that you can build that rapport with students, having that sort of set time to go and speak to others that are either just in your class, in your subject. There is that sort of common thing there with other people, that you're not feeling as stressed maybe of like, what do I go and talk about, because you have that shared interest. So I think having something like that going forward is just going to be such an essential part of what we can do, and it's something that is easily adaptable to moving online. I mean, having a group like this, just talking about common things, it's so easy to do. So just that is something that could be so easily replicated.
That's a really good point and a really good idea. Yes, Katie, I'm going to go to you with this question. It's very much related, but it's about how can we, again, sector or institutionally, engage with incoming new students to make sure that they have the same sense of community as those who have already had an on-campus experience. I mean, autumn we know is not going to look like our traditional autumn semesters. So how do we really build that sense of community in our new student cohorts?
I think this is a really interesting question, and it's actually one that we're looking at right now internally. How do we put in place structures and systems that will help people to build those relationships rapidly? I'm not sure I have a magic answer for this. I think it's really a combination of lots of different things, and really keeping in mind that it's very different for those who've already been on campus and for these new students coming in. I think having incremental communications throughout the summer is going to be really important for that sort of keep in touch aspect, keeping keeping students warm and knowing that they've not been forgotten about. And especially because this year things will be changing across the summer as staff develop their curriculum plans and timetabling, and these things are going to be constantly evolving. It's very different to being able to send out a welcome pack. Here you go, here's all the information you need in one go in whatever, July or August. So really having that incremental communication once people arrive on a virtual campus. Some things that we're thinking about are actually having virtual campus tours, for example, with staff, or potentially what I would really like to see maybe with student ambassadors or current or graduating students, introducing the campus, the teaching spaces, but also the social spaces, and for many of our campuses, the beautiful countryside estate that goes with that of farms and countryside facilities, to help. Although we'll all be part of one big online cohort in September, to also help those beginnings of fostering that this is my campus, then these are the people that I will see once I return to campus. And using a combination of online tools, I think will really help with that. Perhaps even for those who have difficulty with getting online in the first place, having very small, obviously properly protected and physically distanced short inductions on campuses if that's necessary for them, even just to help them to get online to then participate in the wider activities.
Thank you, Katie. That's really interesting to hear about those discussions that you're already having about how to support these new incoming students in the new student cohort. I do have another question that I want to direct at Alex. It's been pretty much the most upvoted question at this point in time. And it's, how do you feel, and the students you're in contact with feel, about the prospect of being taught fully or mostly online?
I think it's one of those ones we've seen a lot of conflicting opinions. You know, one minute you'll see everyone's looking forward to it, and the next you'll see everyone's considering deferring for a year because they don't want to go online. And I think it's both. Both are exactly right. You will have students who are excited about being online. I personally would have preferred that more of my course was online. This shift to engagement obviously has come after I've graduated, but I'm someone who would have gotten so much more value out of being able to watch recorded lectures at my own pace. You know, there are those moments that are slow. There are those moments that, you know, aren't as engaging as other bits, and you can fast forward through them or things like that. And particularly for me, as someone with ADHD, for example, I learn in a very different way to everyone else, and I need that constant stimulation. So being able to tailor my own learning experience is paramount, and again, ties into the cohorts that we're expecting coming in. So I think, yes, there will be those who are worried about it because they get more engagement and more value out of having that face-to-face interaction, being able to read people's body language, things like that. But there will also be a lot more people who prefer to tailor their own experience. So it's a bit of a loaded question, but it's both, really.
Thanks, Alex. Liam, do you, how are you feeling about that, or how are the students that you're speaking to feel about the idea of a fully taught or a blended even delivery of learning and teaching this?
Yeah, I totally agree with Alex. I don't think there is a right answer to it. There's a lot of students that would prefer to not come back to a campus, and I think that's totally fair. Everything is so unknown, and I don't think we can expect students to come back to somewhere they don't feel safe. But I think maybe opposite that, Alex, I think I would have preferred to have been on campus and have that experience of sitting in lectures and going to tutorials and stuff like that. So I think going forward, I think we really need to just speak to our students and not let them know, but ask them what their opinions are on it, and maybe just give them a choice from September onwards. If universities are able to do that, it's looking like the majority of lectures are going to be online, so there's not a problem there. But maybe in terms of what's offered in a tutorial or a seminar, if there can be that sort of hybrid approach, maybe that some are able to attend in person, but alternatively there are online options for students that aren't capable of coming in. And I think that just is so good in an accessibility point of view, that you're just given that sort of just basic choice to everyone that lets them do what's more comfortable for them.
Thanks, absolutely, Liam. Andrew, I have a question that I want to start with you on. It's from Steph Black at Sparks. And the question is about supporting incoming course representatives and sabbatical officers. So our question is, what support do incoming officers and new course or lead reps need to be able to engage in the decision-making processes and quality arrangements going forward? Thinking particularly about training and induction content, as having to quickly adjust that to make sure that the right support is there. So it would be good to explore what is really needed. So what do you see as the training that new, not just sabbatical officers, but course reps will need to support them in this online course representative system as we move forward?
Thanks, Amy. Can I be really, really cheeky and just have 30 seconds on the question before first, if that's okay?
Of course you can.
I think when we talk about online learning, I think we actually have to consider what we mean by online learning as well. So at UHI, I did my entire degree. I think I could probably count the number of times the lecturer was in the room with me on one hand, and the rest of it, the lecturer was somewhere else on VC. Is that online learning? I was on a physical campus, but I was learning using the internet. Whereas we also have degrees that we would call pure online, which don't actually necessarily involve VC at all. All the materials are just posted on the virtual learning environment. You go through that at your own pace, and you do the assignments whenever they're deadlined for. So I think there's a question there around what we actually mean when we say would students be comfortable with learning entirely online I think that's interesting. I think if there's any budding developers out there, I think there's a gap in the market for a new VC software that allows for a much more flexible approach to online learning with breakout spaces and things as well. But to come on to Steph's question in terms of training, this is something I've been puzzling over myself, because obviously I've now got to do a handover with my successor who's coming into post on the 1st of July. I'm based in Orkney at the moment and he's based down in Inverness, so it's not even like we can have a socially distanced meetup or anything like that, because I can't travel off the island because of the travel restrictions at the moment. So it's a really, really tough question. I think we need to prepare folk for perhaps working in isolation for the first time. I think that's going to be a big thing for a lot of people, especially if we've got officers or reps that are coming in who perhaps don't have any housemates or anything like that. That's going to be a really, really big challenge in terms of working. But again, we're not working from home. We're trying to work from home in the middle of a crisis, and there's no shame in struggling to do something like that, I think. So I really don't know if I've got the answer to Steph's question, to be honest, but I think anything we can do to help folk get to grips with working in isolation and being separated from a team that they would normally be in the same room as is going to be a big thing. Moving more towards the class rep, lead rep side of things, that's probably about building a new induction package that emphasizes the use of any virtual learning environment much more, and any kind of new approaches that we're taking to engaging with our reps online. That's something we will be doing at HISA, because as I say, we're trying to make this transition to the online space for our rep meetings more permanent.
Thanks, Andrew. And I think you made a really good point about having to think about that as a current officer who will be doing a handover and then handing over to a new incoming sabbatical officer. And I know Katie's in a similar position. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Katie, on what kind of training institutions, but also the sector, so from organizations like SPARKS or QA Scotland, what can we actually provide incoming sabbatical officers and lead course reps, or other student representatives who are just coming into their roles and don't know what the role necessarily is like in a traditional academic year, let alone and what this year will look like.
Absolutely. Well, we've just welcomed our new team on board this week on Monday, and I'm very happy that actually I think all of our new team are actually here in the session as well. So hi team. And I think something which is actually really important at this time, because we can't be all together and have that kind of traditional team building and those sorts of things, is having plenty of time to get to know each other. And it might take a different amount of time in a virtual space to what we can do out in the real world as such, but taking that time to build those foundations, I think, will be really important and will help carry new officers throughout their year. I also think having some low risk, if you like, things that they can attend and do. So we're doing a shadowing system for the first time this year, and I think it's obviously it's early days, we're only on day 4, but I think it's going to help a lot to get the feel of what's happening without feeling that pressure of I have to contribute right now, I have to stand up for the students, without actually necessarily knowing quite yet how it all works. And having those low risk spaces, I think, is really good. And the same with the in terms of external organizations as well, potentially having those informal ways to connect with people like yourselves at QAA or officers at other students associations across the country will also be very helpful to just get comfortable in the role and in the space and with each other.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. Alex, I'm going to turn to you for the next question, which kind of plays on something that you talked about before, but I'd like to unpick it a bit. In your answer to the first guiding question, you talked about student engagement in decision-making processes and the fact that you might have seen that increase. I'd love for you to explore that a bit more. Rowena has submitted a question that's been upvoted quite a lot, and it says, how far have students been fully and structurally involved in discussions around responses to COVID-19 in your institution? has involvement been built in, or was there a retreat to manager-led command and control before students were then integrated in the decision-making process? I guess what you were talking about was even since then, but I'd love to see kind of that explored. Was there a shift immediately and then a return to students in decision-making, or have you just seen an increase across the board with COVID-19 and our shift to online teaching?
So when COVID-19 really struck in the lockdown, our university started shutting. So it was actually a couple months before I took office. I actually just started on Monday. And the president at the time, Kieran, was contacted. It was, I think, about Friday. I think it was a Friday when it started to look bad with Corona reaching the UK and spreading quite rapidly. And it was that night he was on calls all night with senior management of the university. He was in meetings all day the next day on a Saturday. Both him and the senior management were in talks a lot. And then then it was announced that the university was going to be shutting in the coming week. And that Monday was when we were having school officer meetings, and our academic registrar and our vice principal, or deputy principal for learning and teaching came along and had a really open discussion alongside the sitting president and vice president of well-being with the school officers, informing them of decisions that are being made, and then brought it to them and said, how does all of this sound? Because obviously it's still early days and things like that. And over the course of time since then, there's been those bi-weekly meetings with the school officers where they're getting direct contact to the deputy principal for learning and teaching and feeding back in that open and honest space the issues that are arising within their own networks of students. But as well, we've seen the university create its own COVID-19 learning and teaching response with lecturers and staff from all key decision makers from all 5 campuses. So around 50, 60 people that meets every week, including the education remit sabbaticals like myself and the president. So we have those meetings ongoing every week, and we're feeding in as much as we can and picking up on issues as they arise. But yeah, it's been very much just sort of getting them included as much as possible. You know, when there is an issue that comes up, feeding that back, you know, putting them in touch. And a lot of times, even the school officers themselves are having near weekly meetings with heads of, with important people in their school. So sometimes head of school, sometimes directors of learning and teaching, their own head of departments. So they've really been brought into all those decisions because the university has, rightly so, and done a very good job of doing it, recognized the importance that student voice has, particularly in this panic culture.
Thank you, Alex. I think it's a really interesting point that you made about the involvement of students in institutional decision-making processes, not just at the top with sabbatical officers or the president in the kind of institutional COVID-19 response groups, but also in faculties engaging with their faculty officers or school officers, and that kind of trickled down, because we know that student voice and student engagement shouldn't just be at one level. We need to, as a sector in Scotland, we feel very strongly about students as partners. So it's great to see that really happening with you at Heriot-Watt. Liam, I'd be interested in your perspectives. Have you seen student representatives engaged in the processes of decision-making around COVID-19 and after? And if not, where do you think kind of improvements or positives could be found moving forward?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Alex. I've had a similar experience. We've been, so from, I think it was a Friday, from the very start, our president, Scott, was involved with sort of discussions with senior management, just that first move to not being taught on campus. And from that point forward, I know us as sabbatical officers have been involved in meetings, but it definitely trickled all the way down that schools have been meeting with their class reps to get that, probably that lived experience of what they feel. And I mean, at the end of the day, they're the students that are going through it, so getting their input in it is just fundamental. But definitely, we've had the university been holding weekly sort of learning and teaching committees. So from that point of view, as an education officer, I've been on that, and we have 4 other reps on that. So there's been that constant input from students on what's happening, and it's just been made abundantly clear if any students have any concerns, that's the point to raise it. But even in terms of emails and stuff like that, staff have been more than happy to take any concerns in, and they're responding to them. So it's been so welcomed. We've been so welcomed as students into how our input has been. But even going forward, we've been involved in sort of teaching planning work streams for what they're going to look like for the next academic year, and ways that we can sort of make it as exciting as possible to engage students, and like looking at stuff like gamification, how we can embed that in our teaching. So there's really exciting stuff going forward, and it is so nice to be able to say that students are involved in it at every step of the way. So it's really reassuring.
That's fantastic to hear, Liam. Andrew, I wanted to direct this question to you as we kind of start to end the session. This isn't the last question, but we're nearing it. You know, we've talked a lot today about students feeding their experiences into institutions or into students' associations. And an issue that I think the sector has very broadly felt, and it is just something that we've dealt with for a long period of time, is the issue of trying to close the feedback loop. So responding to student voice and how we then communicate as a sector, as institutions, to students. Have you seen any challenges come out at your institution related to that, or any really exciting practice that might have changed because of COVID-19?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one for us, because we were actually in the middle of conducting a short life working group on altering our approach to closing the feedback loop, and of course that work got completely scuppered by COVID coming out of nowhere. So the stage we were at is we're basically looking to build a kind of framework for closing the feedback loop that would be applicable across our whole partnership, and that would work physically as well as digitally and things like that. But we have I guess we have seen an improvement in the way that we've closed the feedback loop, because students have been very proactive, as I was saying earlier, about coming to us whenever the university perhaps puts out a communication that they don't fully understand, and they'll come to us for the clarification. And then the university extremely proactive about listening to HISA and clarifying that with frequently asked questions and things like that as well. Another thing that we tried for the first time recently was writing an open letter to our Vice Chancellor on the issue of graduations. And we shared that on our social media pages and things like that, so that students could see what we'd done with the information they'd given us about their feelings on graduations. And then we communicated back to them after that letter had been discussed by one of the senior committees at the university about the progress that had been made. So I guess we've used this as an opportunity to experiment with new ways of closing the feedback loop. In terms of, I don't know if there's been any new challenges. It's just kind of the ever-present challenges of how do you make sure that what you've fed back on is what the students have actually asked you to do. You know, you've done something, but did you actually hear the students right in the first place? And I think that's an interesting challenge that the sector will be looking at for a while to come anyway.
Thank you so much. We're nearing the end of our time, and I think the fact that we still have 30 questions in the question and answer box shows how much our delegates have been enjoying our conversation. And I hope that the chats in the comment box have been, you know, ongoing throughout the whole session. I really look forward to looking at that later. My final question for you all, and I do appreciate we're running out of time, so I'd love some brief answers, but this is a big question, is our final guiding question, which was, is there a new normal for student engagement and voice as we look towards the next academic year? Is there a new normal at all, I guess? Katie, can we start with you? And then we'll go to Alex and Liam and then Andrew.
Sure. I know a lot of people don't like this term new normal. I actually find it quite attractive, because I love this idea that actually we can just revolutionize these things really quickly, even when we thought that it was impossible to change them. I think there are going to be lots of new normals across all of our institutions across the country. I really think that this has been an opportunity for us to try new things, and some of them will work, some of them won't. But going forward, I can definitely see our work at SRUC being really enhanced by this experience, working virtually with students and being able to speak to them more often than ever before, being able to gather information from them, you know, at the click of a button, type a sentence, you've given us some feedback. And although I don't think it can ever replace that face-to-face, which eventually I'm sure we will get back to, I definitely think it's something which we will look at in integrating and embedding in our practices in the future. So yeah, that will be a new normal for us.
Thank you, Katie. Alex?
Yeah, so I completely agree. We're definitely going to see a new normal. And I think, as Katie said, there's going to be a bunch of new normals. We can certainly expect greater interactions with feedback. I think we need to, what this has really shown is that we need to rethink how we're collecting feedback. We need to do it on the students' terms. Students don't really interact with surveys as much. We all have a lot of experience with that. But I think it's really highlighted that sense of approaching them on their own terms. Faster feedback mechanisms through informal channels, embedding mechanisms within our VLEs to promote student communities will fuel that greater engagement and especially remediate the loss of organic social interactions that we're going to have by not having that face-to-face teaching. Without the typical classroom settings, we have to create the new forms of engagement for students and embed them within those online spaces. Online classrooms, breakout rooms and virtual sessions, forums and discussion boards on VLEs. Blended approaches will be the new norm, absolutely. I think they are absolutely here to stay, and for good reason. Taking both approaches really maximizes the value of our offerings and allows us to combat this marketization of higher education we're seeing. We can provide the best value for money and stop students questioning what we're getting out of fees. These approaches will also no doubt increase the engagement and that sense of community and belonging. And there's always that concern of providing recorded lectures causing a drop in online engagement, but we shouldn't put so much stress on students attending them live. Let them access it when they feel they need to, when they're ready. Let them learn at their own pace. It's what they want. They'll watch at their own speed, and it's what, as I said, I would have done if I had had the option. And more importantly, they'll be able to use them as revision materials. We're providing them with the best experience possible by giving them that repository of information. Students are far more likely to come on campus if their courses have that flexible delivery or flipped classrooms. Students are tired of lectures, in the typical sense. We want those targeted sessions that look at not being content driven, but being about a specific task or achieving something, promoting engagement and participation. We've already seen more value gained from tutorials and workshops, so why not make that our main face-to-face delivery method?
Great, thank you, Alex. Liam.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is such an exciting time for what the new normal will be. Just looking forward, as sort of radical change is going to happen, but what we've seen in the last few weeks is that it's something that people can adapt to. I've said students are resilient, so we just have to keep pushing forward with that and making changes. All we can do is try, so just keep doing that, and at the same time speak to your students, and if it's not working they will tell you, but let's hope for the best.
Thank you, Liam. And Andrew, how about you round us off?
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, no, this is it. It is a new normal, and there's so many things that we can normalize now, and a lot of these things I'm seeing in the chat, we have smashed so many barriers to education that we've been told for years have been immovable and impregnable. But let's normalize not moving away and spending £500 a month just to access higher education or further education. Let's normalize learning from your bedroom if that's how it's the most accessible to you. Let's normalize that. Let's make that seem exactly what it is. It's exactly equal to learning by going into lectures. Your degree is not worth any less just because you haven't attended physical lectures and because you haven't moved away to attend university. Let's just normalize accessible learning. That's it. I think it's as simple as that, really.
Thank you, Andrew. And I think that was a great statement to end this session on. I want to thank all of our speakers today, or our panelists today, Katie, Alex, Andrew, and Liam. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you, and I'm sure the delegates feel the same way.